The parable of the Good Samaritan. Hi everyone. Welcome back to another video where we dive into the stories and lessons of the Bible. Today, we're talking about one of the most famous and powerful parables ever told by Jesus. The parable of the Good Samaritan. It's a story that has inspired kindness, compassion, and love for centuries, and its message is just as important today as it was 2,000 years ago. Let's get started. To understand the parable of the Good Samaritan, we need to know why Jesus told it in the first place. It all starts in the Gospel of Luke, chapter 10, verses 25 to 37. A teacher of the law, essentially an expert in the Jewish religious laws, comes up to Jesus with a question. He asks, "Teacher, what must I do to inherit eternal life?" Jesus, as he often does, responds with a question of his own. What is written in the law? How do you read it? The teacher answers perfectly, quoting from the scriptures. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, strength, and mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. Jesus says, you have answered correctly. Do this, and you will live. But the man, wanting to justify himself, maybe to prove his own goodness, asks another question. And who is my neighbor? Now, this is where Jesus tells the parable of the Good Samaritan to challenge the way people thought about loving others. Here's how the story goes. A man was traveling from Jerusalem to Jericho. Now, this was a dangerous road, steep, winding, and filled with robbers. And sure enough, the man is attacked. The robbers strip him of his clothes, beat him up, and leave him half dead on the side of the road. Now, here's where it gets interesting. First, a priest comes by. You'd think a religious leader would help, right? But no. The priest sees the man, crosses to the other side of the road, and keeps walking. Then, a Levite comes by. Levites were also religious people who worked in the temple. But he, too, sees the injured man, crosses over, and walks away. Finally, a Samaritan comes along. Now, you have to understand, Jews and Samaritans did not get along. They were enemies. Most people hearing Jesus' story would expect the Samaritan to ignore the man or maybe even harm him further. But instead, the Samaritan has compassion. He goes to the man, cleans and bandages his wounds using oil and wine, and then places him on his own donkey. He takes the man to an inn and cares for him. The next day, the Samaritan gives the innkeeper 2 silver coins, enough to cover days of care, and says, "Look after him, and when I return, I'll reimburse you for any extra expense you may have." Jesus ends the parable with a question. Which of these 3 do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of robbers? The teacher of the law responds, the one who had mercy on him. And Jesus tells him, go and do likewise. This short story carries an incredibly powerful message that challenges us to think about what it means to love our neighbor. Your neighbor is anyone in need. The teacher of the law wanted to limit the definition of neighbor, maybe just to his friends or people like him. But Jesus shows that loving our neighbor means caring for anyone who needs help, no matter their race, background, or social status. Compassion requires action. The priest and Levite were religious people, but they didn't act on their faith. The Samaritan, on the other hand, didn't just feel sorry for the man, he took action. He gave his time, energy, and resources to help someone in need. Kindness breaks barriers. In Jesus' time, Samaritans and Jews were enemies. By making the Samaritan the hero of the story, Jesus challenges prejudice and shows that true love and kindness go beyond cultural or societal divisions. So, what does this mean for us today? It means we're called to show compassion to others, our neighbors, strangers, and even those we might consider enemies. It's not always easy, and it often requires sacrifice, but this is how we love like Jesus. Let's take a moment to think. Who are the people in our lives that we might overlook? Maybe it's the new student at school, the neighbor who's struggling, or someone who's very different from us. The parable of the Good Samaritan challenges us to step out of our comfort zones and ask, how can I help? Sometimes, it's as simple as listening, lending a hand, or showing kindness when it's needed most. Remember, love isn't just a feeling, it's an action. So, the next time you see someone in need, remember the Good Samaritan. Jesus says, go and do likewise. Let's challenge ourselves to love others with compassion and mercy, just like the Samaritan in the story. If you enjoyed this video and found it helpful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content on faith, stories, and life lessons. And as always, let's go out and be kind, be loving, and be a good neighbor. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.